could sense a dark presence at the edge of my consciousness. Not Arthas, not Ner'zhul. Something else. It is that very presence I sense lurking beyond the shattered sky above.
Shortly after saying that, Bolvar was able to put a name to that presence, the one that he had felt for years. That is Zovaal, the Jailer, the antagonist of the Shadowlands expansion. And this is a massive revelation. In this, the first of our two-part series on the Scourge, you are going to learn the answer to the age-old question. Who is the Lich King? Who was actually in control? What was going on within the helm? You're going to understand who and what he was from inception years ago right up to the fall of Bolvar. This is what makes the lore click. What makes Shadowlands the expansion click. And in part 2, you are going to learn the nature of the Scourge themselves. So, strap in. For better or for worse, Blizzard are making big moves with the lore, and you are in for quite a ride. If Chronicle 3's account of Arthas felt off to you, and of course if you played the game during Wrath of the Lich King and paid attention to the lore, then doubly prepare yourself. Because when Uther spoke to Jaina in the Halls of Reflection, I don't think that any of us knew how important his words would be, how fundamental the questions raised by, and of course the conclusion of, Wrath of the Lich King would be. Well, today, that's what we're going to deal with, and it's going to be quite a video. Of course, you should not be like the Lich King. You shouldn't let your home be that sparse, and that's why you've got to head up today's sponsor, Displate. They are just really cool. And if you follow my link, you are going to get 20% off for 7 days, which is a pretty sweet deal. Now, okay, look at this. This was our meeting table at the game dev office, right? It was a bit bare, wasn't it? So first, I slapped up the included magnets, and once that's done, I can put up whatever displate I want. They just snap on and off. Now, the team is currently working on a science fiction project that you'll learn more about soon enough, and I think that's why this lovely Hubble one was a perfect fit. Now, of course, if you want Blizzard stuff, good news, they have official Blizzard displates. It is so easy to customize the look of your place, be at home or work, great for your office and work from home, and the range is just bloody ginormous. And of course, you're seeing the ones we've got now. One thing I particularly love as well is they offer a matte finish option, which I think is just super clean looking. I mean, come on, matte finish, printed in metal, it's just cool. Then the whole form factor with the swapping is just great for variety. And of course, the magnets are perfect if you are a renter like me. Displate are also great to artists. They plant a tree for every one that they sell, and soon we'll be getting our own made. You will get 20% off for the next 7 days with my link, and 20% of the proceeds go to us. It's a win-win, and it's much of what's actually letting us do so much more these days. So thanks to Displate for sponsoring. This is a video the team's put a lot of heart into, and I hope you enjoy it. I should note that for full context, you really should watch this video. It covers how the Force of Death, the Jailer, have, for countless millennia, infiltrated and manipulated other cosmic forces. Now, this is rock solid. It is based off a lore book that is found in Revendreth. And it's quite the video. We even voice acted it. It's very fun. For now, the Dreadlords, though, have been essentially always working for Death. That's the key thing to know, but you really should watch that video for the full context. Just who is the Lich King anyway? The push and the pull between the various personalities locked within the helm has long sparked debate within the lore community. But now, with Shadowlands, we know a hell of a lot more. The Jailer has a presence within the helm. I mean, you heard what Bolvar had to say at the top of this video, didn't you? Well, here's what followed, just in case you had any lingering doubts.
I dare not travel with you, even free of the helm. I fear I would become bound to the will of its true master.
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt, the Jailer is the true master of the Helm of Domination. And on its own, this is something that raises significant questions, but when placed within the context of Wrath of the Lich King's events, it directly answers many questions, and indeed, it does make much of what happened during that expansion, including some of the things that were a bit confusing at the time, actually make sense. And this all comes back to the question, was the Lich King in fact a puppet of the Jailer? We had long wondered who was actually in control within the helm, but now that we know the Jailer was there, we have to work out how much of that was Arthas, how much of it was Ner'zhul, how much was the Jailer. And indeed, you then have to think, is there a reason why only beings plagued with arrogance and guilt were so easily overcome by the helm's dominating powers? And then, indeed, why did the noble Bolvar not just turn against us? Seemingly, he was able to resist. To begin answering these things, we're going to start by re-examining Afterlife's Bastion.
The runes on his blade were unmistakable. This dark agent runs free on a mortal world with the power of the Maw itself in hand. Our realm is imperiled.
Impossible.
Yes, here you see a Kyrian call Arthas an agent of the Maw. Now, at that point, you should note that Arthas was not yet the Lich King. He merely held Frostmourne. He was a servant of the previous Lich King, meaning that yes, even Ner'zhul, the Ner'zhul Lich King, was under the Jailer's thumb. And of course, as we know from Bolvar, the Jailer is the true master of the helm that Ner'zhul wore. And this would make you wonder, if it is his helm, the Jailer's helm, and therefore his source of control on Azeroth, why would he have Sylvanas destroy it? And that's where I think the answer is extremely clear. Plan A failed. And to understand this is to understand the true nature and the origin of every Lich King, and that's exactly what we are going to do in this video. The Jailer kicked off the Lich King project by having the Dreadlord slot into Kil'jaeden's plan for Ner'zhul. You see, Kil'jaeden wanted to soften up Azeroth for a Legion invasion, and the Jailer wanted to exert his influence on the planet, with the eventual goal, as he does tell us quite shortly in Shadowlands, of consuming Azeroth's world soul. Ner'zhul only got them so far. Of course, Ner'zhul was the Lich King, his power had grown, but the Legion were still a problem, especially since in those early days, the Lich King's powers were still limited. Enter Arthas, an arrogant, fragile man. He was identified as a perfect host, and he was lured north by the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis, who, based on documents found in Revendreth, we do believe was in fact an agent of death embedded deeply within the Legion. Arthas, an arrogant, flawed man with all of his insecurities, fell for the whole thing. He was drawn north. He took Frostmourne, forever dooming his fate. Yes, Mal'Ganis did appear to be fully sided with the Burning Legion and Kil'jaeden, but again, I would implore you to watch our video on the Dreadlord documents that are found in Revendreth. They are foundational. Quite some time, though, after taking up the sword, Arthas and Kel'Thuzad actually worked together on what they thought was the Lich King's command to stop the Legion from controlling the Lich King. This is what sent Arthas north again, where he defeated Illidan, thwarted Kil'jaeden's plans, and took his place as the new Lich King, and he merged with the Helm. What this did is this secured the Jailer's center of power on Azeroth. He had a Scourge army up in the north, he had a Lich King whom he could control, and the Legion were done away with. 5 years later then, Arthas awoke, and clearly the Arthas Lich King was supposed to overrun Azeroth. That is what we prevented from happening in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. So yes, Arthas failed. The life of the Arthas Lich King then requires deep thought. You see, during Wrath of the Lich King, many questioned who was actually in control. At the time, we wondered, was it Arthas, or was it Ner'zhul? Of course, we now know from Bolvar that the Jailer was also in the helm and was the helm's master. And because of that, I would say, just listen to the spirit of Uther.
Arthas is not here. Arthas is merely a presence within the Lich King's mind. A dwindling presence.
Yes, Uther's own words do make it clear that Arthas was not in full control. And if that is not clear enough for you, well, here is what Uther goes on to say.
I suspect that the piece of Arthas that might be left inside the Lich King is all that holds the Scourge from annihilating Azeroth.
Yes, even though the Arthas Lich King tore out his own heart and tried to purge his humanity, it seems there was a small part of Arthas still left in there. And this does actually make you wonder, if the Lich King did succeed in defeating us atop Icecrown and killed Tyrion, then would the last slivers of Arthas have tried to resist the Jailer's ultimate ambition of consuming Azeroth's world soul? Actually, that might have been the case. But as you can see from Wrath of the Lich King, Arthas was quite clearly not in full control. I think those words from Uther really do spell it out rather clearly. Now, Warcraft Chronicle, Volume 3, then makes things initially far more complicated with what it says, but upon a deeper investigation of what's there, it actually does make complete sense. Now, much of Chronicle 3 has been recontextualized by the Shadowlands expansion, such as the origins of Frostborn, which Blizzard have confirmed are not exactly what's in Chronicle 3, things like the origins of the Plague of Undeath, which we will cover in our second and final part of this series, and then, as we're going to discuss today, Arthas' account of events while he was the Lich King. You see, in Chronicle 3, it is suggested that Arthas utterly obliterated Ner'zhul, that he had complete control, and that Arthas himself was interested in defending Azeroth against Void and Fel. The Chronicle 3 account, of course, makes absolutely no mention of the Jailer or the Shadowlands as we now know it to be. Yet, as you heard from listening to Bolvar in the beginning of this video, the Jailer is the master of the Helm of Domination, the helm that makes the Lich King the Lich King. So then, when we read Warcraft Chronicle Volume 3 and we see this sort of first-person-ish account of Arthas and really how it says that he was in so much control, how does that make sense if the Jailer is actually the master of the helm and it looks like Arthas was in complete control? And that's where the answer is actually extremely simple. The Arthas Lich King completely believed that he was in control, right? That the dominant persona of the helm truly thought that he was Arthas Menethil, the Lich King, but that in reality, that was an Arthas who, via his personality flaws, had been dominated and controlled by the helm. And this makes complete sense when you rewatch the Fall of the Lich King cinematic.
Father, is it over?
At long last. No king rules forever, my son.
I see. Only darkness before me.
I want you to think about how he looks up and asks his father, "Is it over?" Are those the words of a man who had been in control for years? No. That implies that he felt as if he had woke up from a waking nightmare. And this is where we return to Chronicle Volume 3. In his dying moments, Arthas felt the corruption of the frozen throne fading away from him, and he was faced with the enormity of his crimes. Arthas felt that right as the helm lifted his head and left him, right when he was no longer under the jailer's influence. And remember here, the Frozen Throne, canonically speaking, is just a lump of ice cast down to Azeroth from the Twisting Nether. It is the helm that is the power. So, Arthas was defeated. The helm had no host, and Azeroth seemed to be safe. Plan A for the jailer had failed, and it was about to fail harder. Have a think about all that Bolvar Fordragon went through during Wrath of the Lich King, and how he seemingly retained his sanity through the Lich King's hideous tortures. He is clearly somebody who is strong of will, too strong and too pure of character for the Helm of Domination to work on him in the way that it worked on Ner'zhul and Arthas. Let us then return to Chronicle Volume 3. Bolvar fought to maintain his sanity. He had been a mighty paladin all of his adult life, but the moment he donned the Lich King's helm, the Holy Light had abandoned him. It took nearly all his strength to keep the undead contained. Again, note how Chronicle specifically states that it was the moment he donned the helm. Just like how Arthas' perspective changed the moment the helm left his head. And then how hard Bolvar's struggle actually was. Bolvar clearly could resist the forces of the helm, but only barely. For this is how, by the time Shadowlands happens, he describes his experience as the wielder of the helm.
When the helm rested upon my head, it took all my will to keep its insidious power in check. Many times, I nearly faltered. I could sense a dark presence at the edge of my consciousness. Not Arthas, not Ner'zhul. Something else.
Yes, the helm was trying to break his mind and dominate his will, but Bolvar resisted. This is clearly not what the jailer wanted, as evidenced by the words of the jailer's ally, Sylvanas.
The veil between life and death, where a usurper sits on a frozen throne.
Yes, Bolvar usurped the power of the Shadowlands. And when Sylvanas later says, "You are unfit to wear this crown," it really is quite literal. Bolvar is just not the type of man the helm was made for. He is too strong of will, he is too pure. He is a man without the flaws that made Arthas and Ner'zhul so easily played. And when Bolvar said to Sylvanas that the helm would be her prison, he was clearly talking about the immense will, the immense power that it took for him to resist the helm. Obviously, at that time in the cinematic, he was surprised. He was clearly unaware that Sylvanas was working for the presence that he had fought to resist for all of those years. And indeed, that is why she defeated him so easily. She was using the power of the helm's master against its wielder. Plan A had failed. And this, the cinematic, is when Plan B truly kicked into gear. Arthas failed, and the jailer's helm ended up atop the head of a man who could resist it. What option, then, did that leave the jailer with? Clearly, having a Lich King to do his bidding was not working, and clearly, his plan was to recruit a new agent in Sylvanas, as we see in the Edge of Night short story, and then, years later, to have her kick off the first thrust of his grand plan by defeating Bolvar and destroying the helm. Now, as to why the helm's destruction would then cause the veil between worlds to shatter, well, we do know some things. We know that the Lich King project involved Ner'zhul and Arthas setting up a parallel to Torghast in the material plane. And again, if you thought the Dreadlords were truly servants of the Burning Legion, well, it's actually said in Chronicle 3 that it was the Dreadlords who did and architected a lot of the construction of Icecrown. Well, why would they make it to be the parallel of Torghast if they were actually servants of the Legion? It just does not make sense. The helm was clearly linked to that, such that its destruction would pierce the veil between worlds, giving the jailer access to the material plane and to Azeroth, his ultimate prize. Now, if this all seems a bit far-fetched to you, then I totally understand. There is ample evidence, but I do get that a lot's going on here. But this is all stuff with very solid sourcing within official Blizzard materials. Now again, Bolvar spells it out very clearly that the jailer was in the Helm of Domination, and we know that the Helm and Frostmourne are his. I mean, as soon as the Kyrians see Frostmourne, what happens? She thinks, oh, this is obviously wielded by an agent of the Maw, and that means an agent of the jailer. Then additionally, there are a number of Legion-era quotes from none other than Arthas himself that we should re-examine. Now these are echoes of Arthas that appear to the wielder of the Blades of the Fallen Prince. And let's just take a listen.
You exist by his whim alone. You imagine yourself to be free, but you will always be his instrument.
I would especially say to think about that final line, and then think about how Arthas is described in Warcraft Chronicle Volume 3. Thinking that he is free, but as we now know from the modern lore, in fact being an instrument. And that's not even from the modern lore. That's the thing. The Shadowlands lore, actually, more than anything here, directly backs up Wrath of the Lich King's lore, when Wrath of the Lich King started to ask the question of who is really in control of the helm, and that is what is key. Many thought at the time that this was Arthas' echo warning us about the Bolvar Lich King, perhaps hinting that Bolvar may indeed turn against us. Now that did make sense at the time. Bolvar had been acting in a very creepy fashion. But it also doesn't make sense. Why would an echo, a memory of Arthas, be talking about current events that he did not see and did not experience, when he was in fact in the Maw himself? I do believe that these echoes are likely Arthas talking about his own experiences as the Lich King, suggesting that the jailer's Helm of Domination did just that. Dominate. It's interesting, in fact, how the Jailer revelation actually favors the in-game lore of Wrath of the Lich King over that of Warcraft Chronicle Volume 3. You know, Chronicle 3, its account of Arthas, makes us believe that he really thought he was under control. And that's the thing, it only makes sense if it's Arthas' account, where he believes he is in control, but really is not that much in control. And indeed, Chronicle 3's account of Arthas, it was very first-person feeling. It was very much talking about Arthas' own thoughts on his experience. But the thing is that any time we have heard a being other than Arthas, such as, say, Uther, talk about it, it's been very clear that there is complete doubt over Arthas' control. Uther said that Arthas was merely a dwindling presence in the Lich King's mind in the Halls of Reflection. Then think back to the Matthias Lenner quests in Icecrown. Now that name, Matthias Lenner, well, that's an NPC that appears as a small child, and the name is an anagram of Arthas Menethil, and it's a character that is clearly a representation of Arthas' humanity. Now this is something that is then backed up by the novel Arthas, Rise of the Lich King, wherein Arthas sees visions of a young boy urging him to reject the Helm of Domination. Now that Matthias Lenner questline ends up with Tyrion Fordring destroying Arthas' heart, and this actually greatly weakens the Lich King. Now the thing is, if Arthas wanted to purge his humanity, then why didn't he destroy his own heart? Why did he lock it away? Why did it grant him strength? Was a bit of Arthas struggling against who he became? I mean, if you actually listen to him, Uther clearly believes that that is the case. And as you can see, the Wrath of the Lich King era of lore is just full of information that causes us to question just how much Arthas was actually in control, culminating, of course, with us seeing him wake up from the living nightmare that was being the Lich King, seeing his father, and seeing only darkness. So yes, Wrath of the Lich King was correct in hinting that Arthas was not in full control. Warcraft Chronicle Volume 3 seems to state that Arthas was, and you would think that would have ran counter to Wrath's lore, and even Shadowlands' lore, but that problem is resolved when you then understand that Chronicle is covering Arthas' perspective of his, let's say, Lich Kingship. How does he, whose mind has been subverted, know what's truly happening? Keep Chronicle 3's account in mind and reconsider this line.
You imagine yourself to be free, but you will always be his instrument.
Yes, Chronicle Arthas imagined himself to be free. We now know he was an instrument. So where does this leave us? What's going on? Well, the Jailer's ultimate ambition, of course, is to consume Azeroth's world soul. In Chronicle Volume 3, it was said that Arthas was concerned about existential threats to the planet, such as Void and the Burning Legion. You know, the Burning Legion that wanted to destroy the planet, kill the world soul, and the Void that wanted to also consume it. And here you can see that Chronicle 3's Arthas' goal was right in line with the Jailer's goal, to prevent the other cosmic forces from claiming the most powerful Titan world soul that ever existed. The Jailer had great control over Arthas, and that is wholly unsurprising when you look at all of the evidence. And now that we've covered all of the lore and we've exhaustively looked over all of this evidence, let's just spell out from start to finish a clear version of events so we can all rebase ourselves and understand what's going on. Yes, the true history of the Lich King. The Jailer used the Legion via his Dreadlords to kick off the Lich King project with Ner'zhul. Then later, once things were established, he used Kel'Thuzad and Arthas to remove Legion influence from the Lich King. That, of course, is when Arthas defeated Illidan. He then dominated the Arthas Lich King via the Helm's power, intending to wipe Azeroth clean of life, to use it being united in undeath to fend off attacks from his cosmic rivals, and then ultimately to use the link between realms at Icecrown to free himself from the Maw and to claim his ultimate prize, our world soul. And that is just what he says he wants to do in the Shadowlands opening scenario. This plan failed with Arthas' the Lich King's defeat, and that forced the Jailer to ally with the likes of Sylvanas and Helya and Muzala, and eventually to remove Bolvar from power, to destroy the Helm, and to kick off his new plan. A plan, the stopping of which is our goal in the Shadowlands expansion. And that is it. That is the complete situation with the Lich King. This video was an absolute maddening blast to write. Took quite a while, it was all quite involved, but I think you can see how we've been able to mesh lore from Wrath of the Lich King, lore from Chronicle Volume 3, little bits from Legion, and Shadowlands, and bring it all together to actually create a version of events and an understanding and a framework of the Lich King that actually makes the whole thing make sense and allows us to proceed into the Shadowlands understanding what came before. And I think this will be vitally important when it comes to future patch content, where it very much does seem likely that Uther and Arthas may actually make more of a reappearance than we may have first thought. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and with that, I'll see you next time.